What the heck is going on in the bicycle retail industry? Over the last 3 weeks, I've had a ton of messages in my inbox on Facebook asking me, why are so many bicycle retail stores going out of business? And like any complex problem, there isn't a single reason, but a combination of a number of reasons that are conspiring to undermine the entire independent bicycle business. Now, before I talk about some of why the independent bicycle shop business is failing, and it is failing, I want to mention that I haven't been in the bicycle retail industry now for almost a year. I left retail bicycle shops about a year ago, and now I work in a completely different industry that's unrelated to the bicycle industry at all. And that's good because after spending about 43 years, I started working in the bicycle industry when I was 15 years old at Schumann Schwinn Cyclery in Detroit, Michigan. After being in the industry for well over 40 years and now having left the industry, I'm free to say whatever I want. I don't have allegiance to anybody. I don't owe anybody anything. So right or wrong, I can be completely honest about the bike industry. And for over 4 decades, when I was working in the industry in nearly every capacity, from the brand level at Felt Bicycles to the world's largest online retailer, to owning my own successful brick and mortar store for 17 years before I lost it and it went out of business, and working for several other retailers and as a rep and everything else. I was even a sales manager in the bike industry for a while. After doing all of that, this is really the first time that I can be completely transparent about what's going on in the bike industry. And the news really isn't very good. Why are so many bike shops going out of business? Well, like any other problem, there isn't a single reason. It's sort of a brutal death by 1,000 cuts. But if you want to boil down what's wrong with bicycle retail into a one-liner, it's failure to adapt. Bicycle retail has been traditionally a mom and pop business that started largely by enthusiasts who probably don't have a ton of capital. Now that not only goes for your corner bike shop, it also goes for your high-end triathlon and road bike retailer, your high-end mountain bike retailer, and the most remarkable thing, and this is something I discovered when I worked for the bike brands, it even goes for many of the US bike brands with the exception of the big three, Trek, Giant, and Specialized. Those 3 companies are actually quite well capitalized. Beyond those 3, in the United States, if you're in the bike business, you probably have one foot in the grave and the other foot on the financial banana peel. But back to some of the reasons that conspire to undermine the U.S. bicycle retail business especially. First of all, I would suggest it's an overall lack of retail sophistication. The bicycle retail industry is intensely incestuous. In other words, when you talk to a bicycle retailer about bicycle retail, they tend to talk about other bike shops. How's your bike shop doing? They say, well, compared to the guy across town. But that's a very myopic view because bicycle retail does not compete against other bicycle retailers. It really competes against everything else in the retail space that people spend discretionary income on. And that includes experiences like, for instance, the Apple Store. 2 or 3 decades ago, there was no such thing as Apple. People didn't own $1,000 smartphones, but they do today. So with people's discretionary income being relatively finite over the last 2 or 3 decades, when you introduce new discretionary purchases such as smartphones, laptop computers, all the other electronics and everything else, the increase in vehicle costs, how most people don't own a vehicle now, many people lease it. It just costs more money for people to be alive today and own what they consider to be the necessities. That leaves less money for them to spend on experiences like cycling. To make matters worse, bicycle retailers have not maintained a similar ownership and buying experience to experiences like the Apple Store. Think about what happens to you when you go into the Apple Store. It's vibrant, you have to make an appointment, there's a beginning, middle, end process. They always have beautiful displays, there's compelling product, there's just a lot going on. There's a lot of buzz and everything is very streamlined, the staff is well informed. There's a process for everything. Think about when you go into the local bike shop. It's difficult to even get anybody who's halfway decent to wait on you, so it's a train wreck. Bottom line, bike shops have not kept up with the times, and they're being punished for it now. Listen to this. A recent book, this is a good book, it's called Leading Out Retail, and it was written by a guy who's pretty good authority on bicycle retail. His name is Don Perry. There's one statistic I want to read to you from this book that is incredibly relevant. In any major city, the data suggests that very soon 1/3 of all bicycle retailers will be out of business. According to the National Bicycle Dealer Association, the number of retailers in the United States since the year 2000 has decreased by 2,140. That means 2,140 local independently owned bike shops have closed, and more are closing all the time. 1/3 of bicycle retailers have closed. And part of the reason for that, not all of the reason, but part of the reason, is because the shopping experience in general in a bicycle retail store is actually pretty crappy. Shops have failed to adapt. When you talk about adapting in the retail environment and you talk about a process-based experience, you talk about things like McDonald's or the Apple Store, as I mentioned, that has a beginning, middle, end process. Bike shops don't have that. You walk in there, if you're lucky, you get waited on, but for the most part, you're kind of on your own. There's too much supply in the bike industry. There's always too many bikes, and everybody who's a bike buyer knows you never pay full price for a bicycle anymore. So as a result, it's been very difficult for bicycle retailers to protect price and to protect profit. Bicycle retailers haven't innovated processes. They haven't come up with good reasons for people to go into the store and continue to revisit the store, spending more money, not just on new merchandise, new bicycles, new accessories, but new processes. When you compare the scuba industry, the scuba diving industry, the shooting sports industry, talk about an industry that's challenged by conversations about terrible things like mass shootings and gun control. The gun industry is actually doing quite well, despite all this horrible publicity and these just tragic news events. Another thing is no standards. The bike industry has no standards across the board for what it means to perform great service or do a good bike fit. They just sort of make it up as it goes along, and it's different from one retailer to another. As a result of that, the shopping experience in bicycle retailers tends to be increasingly frustrating, especially when you compare it to your experience when you go to the Apple Store to get a new iPhone, like the one I'm using to film this interview. Some of the other things that are going on is that bicycle retailers have had a terrible time adapting to online sales. As a matter of fact, if you talk to most bicycle retailers, they'll tell you that online sales are the enemy. They're actually not. I like to say that on the internet, everybody is 800 by 600. All retailers are the same size, and it's never been more true than today. Now, while it is difficult to compete against a mega retailer like an Amazon.com because they have something like one-click, which is absolutely miraculous, niche brands like Rafa have been able to compete in the battle space of online retail by using unique brand messaging, high-quality products, and maintaining pricing. So because of that, people have sought out these buying experiences. They're unique, they're different, and they're credible. The local bicycle retailer, if they have a website at all, it's usually pretty bad. It's seldom updated. They mostly don't use social media very effectively, and it's pretty much a train wreck. So going back several decades ago when e-commerce started, nearly every bicycle retailer missed that boat and is still struggling to catch up. Now it's too late. The mobile service model that we're seeing from local retailers like American Cycle and Fitness is a hopeful trend, and I think that's a good trend. We also do see a few remaining local retailers that are pretty darn good. One of the guys I really like is Ron Schmidt from Fraser Bicycles. Fraser has a couple stores locally, and those guys have done a pretty good job. Ron in particular is a really good go-to guy. But even with a business like Fraser that is well run and seems to be fairly well capitalized and have some nice locations, it's a little hit or miss depending on who waits on you that day. If you get Ron Schmidt, you're going to get great service because that guy's been in the bike industry forever. He knows what he's doing. He's a nice guy and he loves to take good care of customers. If you get one of the other employees in their new locations, I don't know, maybe you'll have a good experience, maybe you won't. And maybe you won't go back if you don't deal with Ron Schmidt. And that's a problem because what we need in the industry are more people like Ron Schmidt. We also need more people like the AC&F stores, American Cycle and Fitness. They've got a store on Main Street in Royal Oak, and they've got a number of other stores throughout Michigan. These guys are forward-thinking enough to adopt this mobile service idea, where these trucks can come out to your house and service your bicycle, and this is a great idea. In general, however, the bicycle industry is getting what it deserves. It hasn't kept up. It hasn't moved forward. I could give you a million examples why, but we're already 11 minutes into this. If you're not bored with it already, thanks for watching. But the bike industry just hasn't kept up. It's getting what it deserved, and now a lot of these shops are going out of business. The most recent shop I worked in, for over a year, I determined that the cash register was in the wrong place, and they refused. They didn't move it for a year. How simple is that? Bike retailers fail to adapt. They're not moving with the time, and they're getting what they deserve. They're being put out of business. They're being replaced by online sales, mobile service, and forward-thinking businesses who are willing to deliver a better customer service experience. If you want to know what's wrong with the bike industry, in a nutshell, that's it. You got to deliver a forward-thinking customer experience, or people will go elsewhere.